underground pyramid in Alaska. On May 22, 1992, scientists studying shock waves from a Chinese underground nuclear test in Lopner recorded a grainy pyramid-shaped spot of interference twice as large as Egypt's Great Pyramid of Giza. Researchers believe that this anomaly below Alaska's Mount Denali is an artificial structure made of black stone. The top of this 550 feet tall dark pyramid is said to be 150 feet below ground. The area was reportedly off limits throughout the Cold War era, possibly due to the fact that Alaska was on the front lines. Retired U.S. Army counterintelligence agent Doug Muchler first attempted to bring the pyramid's existence into light on the show Coast to Coast AM. He was also later interviewed by investigative journalist Linda Moulton Howe, who has spent years researching the pyramid. Muchler said that in the fall of 1992, he was stationed at Fort Richardson in Alaska. He was sitting in a room with some off-duty soldiers when on Anchorage Channel 13 broadcast a news story about then nuclear test and subsequent discovery. He said that he went to the news station the next day, and the manager of the station denied the story and said he had no idea what Muchler was talking about. On the way out, a younger employee nervously ushered Muchler over and claimed that the story was true. He said that a couple of scary guys in suits met with the station manager and confiscated everything that had to do with the story. Muchler was transferred the next year to Fort Meade in Maryland, where there was a giant archive of top-secret government files. He found the Alaska files, but before he could read them, he was stopped by two men that said he didn't have a need to know for that information and was told to leave. Howe had asked from Muchler and received his DD 214, which is a certificate from the U.S. military that lists everything about the individual's time in the service. Howe said that Muchler is who he claimed to be, and the timing and locations of where he was matched his record. Another person that Howe has interviewed claimed that their father, Marty B. Johnson, worked for Western Electric and had been inside the pyramid. Johnson had told him that he had been taken on a bus with blacked-out windows so he couldn't see what was outside. When Johnson left the bus, he was in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness with a lonely shed as the only structure around. In the shed, there was a large freight elevator. Johnson and the others that he had traveled on the bus with now rode the elevator far down into the earth. When they finally stopped, they found themselves at typical military offices. Concrete floors and only numbers on the doors. At the end of the hallway was a 15-foot tall steel door wide enough to drive a car through. The door opened and inside was a giant cavern. The military officer that was their guide then announced, "Gentlemen, welcome to the Dark Pyramid." Johnson told his son that he didn't know if the pyramid was extraterrestrial in origin, but he did say that it was technology way beyond anything he had ever seen. He said that there were control rooms at each corner. These control rooms measured the energy emitted from the pyramid. Johnson said that his father made a replica of the pyramid made out of aluminum. He ran a small voltage through the pyramid, and the energy was magnified and produced more than enough electricity to power the whole farm. Another person that came forward was Bruce L. Pearson. He said that his dad Lee had joined the Navy right after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and served on torpedo boat 492 during World War II. In the 1970s, the retired Navy veteran and his family moved to Alaska, where Lee and his wife became school teachers. Bruce said that Lee then met a U.S. Air Force pilot and they exchanged war stories. He then asked Lee if he wanted to ride with him on a classified delivery mission near Denali. When Lee got on board, he was informed that it was some weird underground power generating installation. Lee asked if it was nuclear. The co-pilot said that it was nothing that they built. It was thousands of years old and shaped like a pyramid, and that they didn't know where it came from. He said that it generates enough power to power the whole state of Alaska as well as the whole country of Canada. When they got about 5 miles from their destination, Lee was told that the helicopter's instruments were going to go crazy and not to panic, and that they were going to just keep the ground in sight to make sure they didn't hit any obstacles. Lee said that a couple of moments later, everything on board the helicopter went crazy and then went dark. When they touched down, the ground crew began refueling them with the engine still running. Lee had told Bruce that there had been a couple of small guardhouses with towers, as well as 2 freight elevators. Boxes of equipment were piled here and there, and there was electric razor wire everywhere. Overhead, a C-30 was flying circles. 6 men in plain black uniforms unloaded 3 heavy cases, while heavily armed men in the distance had guns as well as jeeps with a .50 caliber machine gun pointed at the plane. In about 4 minutes, Lee and the pilots were on the helicopter and headed back. Once they were back at the airport, they went to a bar where Lee had asked them what he had seen was all about. The pilot told him that the place was more secure than the Manhattan Project and that nobody is supposed to know it exists. He said that it was a giant pyramid made of what is thought to be black stone. It is tens of thousands of years old, and there have been engineers working there since the 1950s. On June 13, 2020, Nathan Campbell had someone fly him into the Denali Park in Alaska and drop him off near Carey Lake, which was just a few miles from what was thought to be the pyramid's location. He had told the pilot to pick him up a couple of months later in the same location he was dropped off at. He had fishing gear, a couple of totes of food, and a big backpack. He also claimed he had a Garmin inReach satellite communication in case he needed to call for help, and GPS tracking. Campbell was never seen of or heard from again. A search turned up supplies Campbell had stored at Carey Lake, and a few miles away a collapsed tent. Inside the tent was Campbell's diary, which appeared to have been chewed on by rodents. The last entry said Campbell had left his campsite to get water. There was no other signs of him.